Welcome to episode 80 of In Touch with iOS, a podcast that talks about iPhone, iPad, Apple Watch, Apple TV, and related technologies, plus tips, apps, and gear. And I'm your host, Dave Ginsburg. My co-host, Warren Sklar, is off this week, but I have a great guest on the show, Rosemary Orchard. Welcome to our show. How are you?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. If anybody doesn't know, Rosemary is a shortcuts expert, does a lot of podcasting. And we'll talk about all of what you do towards the end of the show. But you were going to definitely give us some great things. I've been wanting to talk about shortcuts for quite a long time. I'm by no means a wizard at it, but you are, and you've written a book. You wrote a book, Take Control of Shortcuts, which I was thrilled to see. Take Control is they're such great authors. I've talked to Joe Kiesel many times. I'm sure you're very pleased
Yes.
of it coming out.
Yes, I am. And I'm really pleased that a lot of people that have got it so far have said that they've never really done anything with shortcuts before. And I think that's such a great thing because it's so much fun to play with. I do it instead of puzzles or games. So I may be slightly biased there. But you know, it's great fun to play with and can be really useful for so many people.
Absolutely. So we're going to get into it a little bit and learn a few things here today. But what I also do, we usually do news, but there really isn't any. There really isn't much to talk about. With the CES is coming up in it's about a little over a week. There'll be plenty to talk about it when that runs out. But so we're just going to move right into the topics. And I don't know if you don't know this, Rosemary, but what I do is whenever I have a brand new guest, I always like to ask them what's in their tech bag or a tech pack, and I'm relates to iOS, and I am having some pretty good assumptions. You got a lot of nice things that like we all have. So I'm assuming we could start with the iPhone. You have an iPhone, I assume.
Yes, yeah. I've got an iPhone 11 Pro. I went for gold this time. First time with a colorful iPhone. And it's nice. I like it. I really love the cameras. It's been really great this holiday season to take loads of great pictures. So.
Yeah, the camera's great. I have the Pro Max, and I have the mountain green one, which I really like. But do you also have an iPad, I assume?
I have 3 iPads.
Okay, I have 2. So
gone a little overboard. So my daily drivers, I have an iPad Mini, the latest generation one, and I have an 11-inch iPad Pro. And then for creating things like taking screenshots and doing screen recordings and so on, I have another iPad because this way I don't have to wipe my devices every time and set them up with alternative content. And that's also unofficially my boyfriend's iPad, and Civilization 6 is installed on it, so he can play that.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I have a 12.9 inch that I use for beta testing. It's actually the first gen, which still is a perfectly good iPad.
Oh yeah.
But I have the 11 Pro like you do too as well, and love it. And it's good to like you said, you're doing a lot of things. You want to be able to play with things and not have to wipe and reload. So definitely a good idea. And do you have an Apple Watch as well?
Yes, yep. I have the latest Apple Watch in silver, and it's the smaller one, the 40 millimeter, and that's sitting on my wrist, and that's been pretty useful. I had a bit of a fall earlier this year in San Jose when I was at WWDC and broke my ankle.
I remember hearing about that. Yes,
and and the Apple Watch, I enabled the feature because I don't do gymnastics or exercise, and so I enabled that feature to detect whether or not you've fallen, because by default it's only turned on for people I think over 60 or something.
60,
and I was there going, no,
65, something like that.
Yeah. If I fall over, I want an ambulance. And then it was like, you appear to have taken a hard fall. Would you like me to call an ambulance? And I'm there going, I'm in the US. I'm not quite sure how good my insurance is. So no, I'll figure this out later. Thank you. But it worked. So.
And I remember, of course, I forgot to mention that you and I met at MacStock this year. This is still 2019 as we record this. And that was an absolutely great event. And you did an amazing presentation on Siri shortcuts. And maybe we could touch about that a little bit as well. But that was great to meet you. And I remember you were still having your ankle was still bothering a little bit there. And,
yeah. A lot of people thought I was wearing odd socks. No, one of them was an ankle support. But it's okay. I'm the quirky sort of person who would wear odd socks anyway. So.
Of course, how can I forget Stephen Hackett upgrading your Mac Mini with memory, and him doing the one of the other attendees is iMac. So
yeah, and it was the 21-inch iMac, I think, where you have to take the screen off the front, or 24-inch, I think it is, but you have to peel the screen off of that device.
No, your Mac Mini was easy. Actually did it on my own Mac Mini, so it is pretty easy to do. So, but that's great. Then we good everybody to at least get to know you and understand where you come from as far as technology and what you have. But let's jump right into it. Apple shortcuts. As you wrote in the book, I mean, there are so many great ways to be productive, make things work automatically on all your devices. Why don't you start a little bit about the history? I know it originally started as an app called Workflow, right?
Yeah, so originally the app was written by people who actually used to jailbreak iOS devices,
Right, yeah,
and they built this app called Workflow, and I remember hearing about it when it was in beta, and a bunch of people telling me, this is awesome, but it's never gonna like Apple are never gonna let it onto the App Store because it's just so amazingly
yeah,
good, but it's also something, where you can program on your device. And Apple have locked down iOS and iPadOS pretty well. But as we can see today with the fact that Shortcuts is on our iPads pre-installed thanks to iOS 13, they've had a little bit of a change of heart there. And so it
hmm
started out as this application called Workflow,
right,
and it was the idea was it used these old-fashioned URL schemes to talk to different applications and to do things. And in some cases, it talked directly to web services. So, like Todoist and so on has a web service that Workflow used to talk to, and now
right,
Shortcuts can talk to. And that is how it got started with these little building blocks. And then things improved, and then they were bought by Apple.
yeah,
And after they were bought by Apple, they were renamed. Everyone was very worried
mm.
that Workflow was dead, and lots of
yeah.
people were crying
Oh.
digital tears. And I was there going, I want to be optimistic. And I always like being optimistic. And so 2 years ago at WWDC, the first time I went to WWDC, just
hmm
before David Sparks and I launched the Automators podcast,
Yep.
we'd already recorded a couple of episodes and we thought our episodes were pretty darn good. So we went to WWDC with the intention of talking to the relay people and, getting everything, lined up and just roll those first episodes out the door.
hmm
And I'm sitting there watching the keynote going, well, now we're going to have to re-record because that was iOS 12. And that's when Apple
Yeah.
announced Shortcuts, which is when it
Right.
became part of, the Apple ecosystem properly. It was still another app that you would download and install from the App Store, much like you would Pages or iMovie or GarageBand. But it was an Apple-owned app with a new name, and it got a section in settings where you could add things to it, and developers could add actions to Shortcuts. Now, these weren't amazing actions. It was sort of like open this mailbox in Mail or
Right.
open this photo album in Photos. It was mostly like open things rather than anything else. But it was a good start, and they made good on that implicit promise of this is going to get better from iOS 12. And this year with iOS 13, it's still this year as we talk, as you mentioned,
Right.
they added the ability for developers to add really cool actions to Shortcuts. So instead
Mm.
of just saying, hey, open things, the things people, Culture Code, added an action where you can add a task to things with tags and deadlines and all
Mhm.
of that stuff. So and they can control that now, because it used to be if you had an action in Shortcuts, it was controlled by Apple, which of course is not,
Right.
something that you can easily maintain with the small team they've got. I mean, their team isn't tiny, but it's still a limited number of people. And isn't it better if a developer can say, I want to be able to offer this to the users of my application without having to, send Apple a request and get it approved, get it implemented, test it, blah, blah, blah. And so now everybody can use Shortcuts from a developer's perspective, and they can give people the tools to make their apps even more powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So no, it's very exciting. I need to learn more about it, and I'm definitely gonna. I've been reading your book, and I've got David Sparks's videos I've been watching, and so there's a lot to learn, and that's why I say I wanted to have you on to get my audience here a little more versed on shortcuts, because it's just so exciting. And the thing is, when you first open up shortcuts, and of course I had a mine already with all these other customized shortcuts, so I had to get my other iPhone out here to see. Okay, there's no way these icons are here, as I couldn't remember, as it's been a while. So of course, when you open up for the first time, you go to My Shortcuts, and then the first thing you see is Create Shortcut, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that can be kind of overwhelming.
I
And
know
so
exactly.
because then you tap on create shortcut and say you're on an iPhone. So then you tap create shortcut and it says new shortcut, create a shortcut to yes, create a shortcut to actions you do in your apps every day. Well,
Right.
the grammar there is not great. I think I need to send a bug report on that. But then it's got
Yeah.
this button, add action, and so I
Yeah.
tap on that, and then it's got things like, would I like to call my mom, or
Hmm.
FaceTime my mom, or message a friend of mine, or complete a task in streaks, and it's got some suggestions there, but just based on the suggestions, that's not necessarily a great way to figure out how to
Yeah.
use shortcuts. Um, and so I recommend, if you've never tried shortcuts before,
Hmm.
instead of tapping on create shortcut, in the bottom right hand corner, tap gallery instead, and have a look there to see what you can really do with shortcuts, because they've got some lovely ideas in there. They're not always the perfect execution that I would love to see as a
Yeah.
programmer and nerd, but they're a great place to get started. And you can look at these and, open an app on your Apple TV. Oh, well,
Mm.
that's useful, especially if, you usually sit down and you open, say, the Disney Plus app if you're going to watch The Mandalorian or something.
Yes.
And,
Great show.
you can have a shortcut that does that and controls the lights in your house, to do, to make the perfect movie time. And that's the place to start, I think, for most people. Start in the gallery and play around there.
Now you talk about in the book, you have when you're building shortcuts, you had like a one step. You had a one step book. There was. Oh, sorry, I lost my page here. You had a one step shortcut part of the book here, and
Yes.
actually creating simple one steps. Could you kind of go through that real quick? If what would be a one step shortcut that everybody would want to create?
Well, it really depends on you. But for example, I have a one step shortcut to send a message to my boyfriend that I use when I'm leaving work. And this just
Hmm.
sends a message saying, I'm leaving work. If you need anything from the supermarket, let me know. But it only, so
Mm.
I've enhanced that over the years. So I've added a few extra bits. So it checks whether or not I'm going home to record a podcast. And if I am, it doesn't offer to pick anything up from the supermarket. And if I'm not, then it does. But the one step version of that is just, hey, I'm on my way home from work, should be there in about 20 minutes. And that's all text that I've just typed in there, but that's really useful because it's less the typing that I have to do. And especially when I'm leaving work and I'm carrying things and it's winter, so I'm wearing gloves. The last thing I want to do is, pull my hands out into the icy cold air to type a
Yeah.
loving message when I can just, use my nose, swipe over to the widget screen, tap
Yeah.
the widget with my nose and have it send that message for me without me doing anything else. And he knows I love him, so it's okay if I
Yeah.
send him an automated message once
That
in a while.
that's right, and keeps everything automated but easy, and you get the message
Yes,
across. But
exactly.
obviously, I'm not going to go through the entire book here. But building shortcuts, there's some pretty intense things that a lot of people may not be will be a little scared of. Things like input output and repeat loops and
Yeah.
if and otherwise. And if you want to kind of just generalize about a little bit, just kind of give people what is that all about? What does it do?
Well, essentially, if you want to build a shortcut that does more than just say send a message to somebody or open an application, then you may need to understand a few of the important concepts behind it. And that's where things like an input and output come in, and variables. And these are things that you don't necessarily have to
Yeah.
use. And I do state that at the beginning of the important things to know about shortcuts chapter, that you don't actually need to read that chapter. You could theoretically just skip ahead to the
Hmm.
samples and build the samples and then come back and go, okay, well, this is talking about magic variables. What is a magic variable? And then you look and maybe you read the little section on variables, or maybe you just read the section on magic variables to, fill in the gaps in your knowledge. I'm doing air quotes as I go here, because you shouldn't consider it a gap in your knowledge until you know that you need to know it. It's something that you can learn about and you absolutely can use, but you can also just completely ignore it as a concept and just do exactly what the book tells you to do in the
Yeah.
step-by-step instructions to build things. Because understanding what input and output is, for example, the input is what you put into something and the output is what you get out of it. Well, that's fairly logical, but what does that mean in shortcuts terms? Well, in shortcuts terms, a shortcut can have input and output. So I could send it a photo from Photos and I could get output out from it, so a message or an email,
Hmm.
or an action inside of your shortcut can also have input and output. And so that could be the actual photo that's going into the shortcut, then goes into an action. And it could also be
Hmm.
maybe the phone number of the person that you want to message it to that goes in there. And then the output would be a message as a whole with those different parts of the input put together.
Okay. And so as we talked about just a little while ago is the gallery, and the gallery's, like you said, it's got a lot of great things, and you said there's some things that are good, some things are not. Was anything that
Well,
really stand out for you, or
I wouldn't say it's anything that's, terrible for me. But there are a few things where I look at it and go, that is not the way that I would do things. But at the same
okay,
time, I think that they've done things the way that they've done them so that it's much easier for somebody who's never picked up shortcuts to understand it.
yeah,
Especially, if you're coming from the Mac and you spend most of your time on the Mac, then using the quick look action is probably more helpful than show result, because most people know the quick look is what happens when you tap the space bar.
right,
But what I really love in the gallery section is this area called shortcuts from your apps, and these are all suggestions made by the apps that you use every day
yes, yes,
to actually give you ideas of what to do. And these are where those one action shortcuts are basically built, because you can go in here and you can just tap. So say for example, I would like to create a shortcut that will open my inbox in OmniFocus for me. That's one of the suggested shortcuts for my apps. I just tap on the plus right there. I give it a name, and I can
hmm,
give it, say, the name inbox, and then I can add to Siri. And
yep,
now, whenever I say, Magic Lady inbox, then it will open my inbox, because you can use this via Siri. Or if I look on the today screen that's on the left of the notifications area, then there's a shortcuts widget. And I can also just
hmm,
tap on my new inbox action there and have it open my inbox for me. Or I could even put this on my home screen and hide the OmniFocus icon in a folder somewhere, because I don't
yes,
need it, because I only ever want to go to my inbox on my phone. And that's why I like that section of the gallery, because there's a lot that you can do there, and that's where you can see the magic coming in, I think.
yeah. You know what? I had not spent time going through this list, and it's like, holy cow, there's a lot of things in here I do all the time.
Hmm.
Like from like the HomeKit app, opening up living room lights or a Christmas tree. I've got that set up downstairs. For things like YouTube, being able to search YouTube is with a shortcut, um, and so on. And like I'll be going to Vegas for CES. It says show weather in Vegas. I can create a shortcut now and just keep continually tapping that, keep checking the weather.
Yep.
But yeah, this is great. This is uh, people should know about the messages and um,
Yes.
maps, and I mean it's endless.
Yeah, it's a really great list. So if you look at shortcuts from your apps, I'm looking at this on my iPhone, because
Yeah,
I've
me
got my
too.
Mac in front of me to record the audio for this podcast. But if you see where it says shortcuts from your apps in the top right, there's the see all, and if you go to that, it organizes
Yeah.
it by app for you. And then next to some of the apps, there's another see all button where you can say, okay, for example, I use dark noise to do white background noise while I'm working and
Mhm.
while I'm going to sleep. And
Okay.
if I tap on see all, I have 6 suggested actions, because there are lots of things that I do with dark
Yeah.
noise on a regular basis. And that's just something that for me is really useful, because this is all based. So all of this data is on your device as well. You don't have to worry
Yeah.
about Google knowing that you like to listen to thunder sounds at 10 p.m. at night every night to help you go to sleep. This is all on your device, and so it's based on whatever you're doing on a regular basis most of the time. Every so often you'll see a suggestion pop up and think, I don't think I've ever said kumquat before, apart from once today. Why is it suggesting that I send a message to my friend with the word kumquat? And we were I was helping solve a crossword puzzle. That's why it came up. But
Okay.
it's so sometimes it will make suggestions that aren't necessarily the most useful. They are actions that you've taken recently rather than regularly. But it's a really interesting place to go through and see, well, what am I doing on a regular basis?
Yeah.
So that you can, maybe, and then after you created a one action shortcut to do your thunder sounds, then you might think, well, actually, I also have HomeKit lights. It would be really great if I
Right.
could just press one button and start the thunder sounds and turn off the lights at the same time. And
Yeah.
that's when you can then go back to the My Shortcuts view and tap on that ellipsis in the top right hand corner of the icon. And then you would tap on the plus and add an icon, and you could search for HomeKit. And it would find home things. Or if you just search for home, then it will actually come up with a bunch of really useful stuff for you.
Yeah, no, there's tons of useful stuff here. And the other things that I really like it doing is that creating a PDF has always been a thing I always wanted to do. And I know they built it into iOS 13, but there is a great shortcut that's available or you can design your own, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's I find it's really useful to build these things into shortcuts because then I can actually do specific things with it. So, for example, the built-in iOS, make a PDF. I then have to
Hmm.
say, and I want to share this, and I want to then I have to find the application. So, for example, say I'm
Right,
sending it to you, then I have to, open it in the mail application. Then I have to type your name and everything. And
right.
finding so the way that they've redesigned the share sheet on iOS 13 is, I have to say, not one of my favorite things. I often spend longer than I would like looking for apps now. But with shortcuts, I can say, hey, I want to share this by email as a PDF. And I can have a shortcut that does that. Or I can have a shortcut that makes a PDF and then gives me a choice of three options. So I could send it via mail. I could put it in Yoink, which is one of my favorite little iOS utility applications where I can just dump stuff temporarily until I need to come back and deal with it. And then another option to ask me what I want to do with it if I do want to use the share sheet.
Yeah, no, it's definitely got some major power, and there's also lots of resources out there for other shortcuts. Do you share a lot with the others? Or I know there are going to be some in the book, and
Yeah.
is there other places that you share?
Yeah, so the Automators forum actually has a lot of really lovely shortcuts and lots of
Okay, good.
really nice people in there chatting about things. I would, of course, also recommend David Sparks's video field guide if people are
Me too.
looking to learn about this,
I
because
bought.
he's got
I,
so many great things in there.
it's well worth it. MaxSparky.com. We'll give him a plug.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I bought the course, and it's amazing. He did just an amazing job. Another place that I find is Mac Stories.
Yes. Yeah.
Federico Vertucci. What I actually recommend, one of his amazing new shortcuts called MusicBot.
Oh,
That
yes.
that thing is
That's such a great
amazing.
thing. I
I
know.
don't know if you
I
got
have no
the
idea how many hours he spent working on that,
and he's
in total. I'm sure he's got it time tracked somewhere, but
yeah.
yeah, it's an amazing shortcut. Mac Stories has got some great stuff as well. And of course, I have my blog, rosemaryorchard.com, but there's also a
Yeah.
subreddit for shortcuts, which has got
Hmm.
some really nice ideas in there as well.
Yeah,
So
because I'm looking at some of the shortcuts. I probably saw them probably on on Mac Stories and downloaded like a ton of them.
mm,
Things. One of them like downloading a YouTube video.
yeah.
That's a cool shortcut if you want to be able to have a local copy. I
Hmm.
tell people, hey, grab this shortcut. It's gonna be on your device, and then if you want to watch it later when you're like on a plane, you don't have to be
Yeah.
online.
Yeah.
Um, and there's others like a shorten URL. Does that one?
Yes. Yes. I actually ought to rebuild. So I have a shortcut that will take a link and automatically grab the title and the URL out, and make a mini post on my blog, a link post, and then it will
Hmm.
also tweet it. But I should modify it so that the tweet action actually uses my URL shortener instead of the Twitter URL shortener. Because if you just paste a long URL into Twitter, they put it through their shorteners and they add a bunch of checking stuff on the end. And I would rather use my own, which doesn't have any of that.
Sure. No, and as I just reading off these are just examples of many things that people may want to do, such as getting images from a page. So that I've always wanted to do that. Sometimes you go to a website, there might be some images on that page you want to
Mm,
grab. Um,
yes.
Shortcut
Yeah.
can grab it,
Yes.
and it's endless.
Yeah.
It really
I have
is.
a I have a really lovely one that I use when I come home from work.
Hmm.
And what it does is it checks whether or not it's dark. And then if it is, it turns on my lights. It also
Nice.
stops my commuting timer because I do a lot of time tracking. I like to see where my time goes. And so it stops my commuting timer. If I've got a podcast scheduled within the next 20 minutes, then it, tells me, get ready for your podcast now. And if I don't have a podcast scheduled in the next 20 minutes, then it checks my OmniFocus for the things that I
Hmm.
tagged that I wanted to do after I got home, and shows me any of those if there are any tasks there. And that's something that you can do because I found I was doing the same actions again and
Right.
again, one after another. And then so there's a new application called Toolbox Pro for shortcuts.
Mm.
And this can just add actions. So, for example, shortcuts on its own can't tell you whether or not audio is playing. It can only say, what is your current song, which if you paused your iPhone 2 hours ago, well, it's not really a current song anymore. And that would just return nothing. But if you paused it 5 minutes ago, that it's still not playing audio right now, but it will return the name of the song. But Toolbox Pro, for example, has an action to detect whether or not you're playing audio. And so
Hmm.
I added that to my shortcut, and if I am playing audio, it hands it off to my HomePod, and that
Oh,
really
well.
made me so much happier because I get home and I can just pull out my AirPods and dump them in the case and keep listening because it just handed off to my HomePod without me doing anything really.
And that's in the book. That's right. I just saw that. And
Yeah.
I will also put a shortcut, or I should say a link in the show notes. So it's using the word shortcut for everything here. Uh, it's it's just awesome. And I'm so thrilled you wrote this book because I really like Take Control books. I support them wholeheartedly. Have them speak in my Apple user group I'm president of, and they give us a nice discount, which is nice because we support them so well. And but there's just there's just so much more stuff here. I would definitely recommend grabbing this book and taking a look at it. Was there other things? I always another topic I wanted to ask is about syncing. Do you syncing the shortcuts across all your devices? How does
Uh,
that work?
So I ran into an issue with one of the early iOS 13 betas, and this is entirely my fault for being on the betas so early, where my shortcuts weren't syncing properly. And since
Mhm.
then, they've mostly resolved into syncing, but every so often I run into a little bug where one of them just doesn't sync over, and I'm not quite sure why. This is
Mhm.
something that the shortcuts team are aware of, and they're looking into it to try and find out why. But
Okay.
it's also my fault because I have over 900 shortcuts.
Mhm.
So
And well, you
if you
should.
Yes, and if I didn't have that many shortcuts, I would not have got around to writing a book about it or automating some of the content of the book. A lot of the screenshots went through shortcuts before they ended up in the book, so they were in the right format and the right size and everything. Um, and yeah, and so I do try to get my shortcuts to sync, and the vast majority of the time now they do. It's just every so often one of them gets stuck, but I do sync them, and I also sync the order of them because this way the widget is the same in the same order on both devices. And that's really useful because otherwise my muscle memory is there going, I tap the button in the top left hand side of the day widget. That's not the shortcut I wanted to run. Why is this running? Oh no, my audio has gone to a different device. That's my fault. So I sync the order of everything as well.
Okay. Yeah. No. Syncing is a nice thing, especially if you have an iPad and an iPhone. You want to be
Mhm.
syncing across both devices. And is there anything with shortcuts in the Apple Watch that you've used at all?
I don't really use it via the Apple Watch or actually my HomePod. Technically, it does work perfectly on both.
Hmm.
Perfectly with a slight asterisk. It's a very small one. The you can't necessarily do everything on a HomePod that you could do if you run it on an
Hmm.
iPhone, even if you're running it via Siri on both, just because your HomePod doesn't necessarily have access to, say, for example, OmniFocus or things,
Right.
because it's a HomePod. And if you find a way to
Right.
install OmniFocus or things on your HomePod, then hats off to you. That's great.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it can do a lot of things, especially things like playing music and HomeKit scenes and stuff like that. That it can do no problem, and it will excel at that. But I tend not to really run shortcuts on my watch.
Okay.
But I don't really talk to my watch a lot. I mostly look at it and check
Sure.
my notifications and even very occasionally send emails to people.
No, I mean, I think you're pretty much in the same group of most people with the Apple Watch, but I'm trying to explore it more, try to talk about it more, and just get people, 'cause there's things you can do on it that you don't think about because you already have your phone with you. And that's the
Yes.
reason why I never buy an Apple Watch that has the cellular connection because there's no point because I'm always going to have my phone with me. And that's just me. But
Yes.
some people like to have it that has it built in to the watch and pay the extra money a month for it. And maybe someone who does a lot of working out doesn't want to carry their phone with them or her. That makes it as well. So, and then Apple TV, there are some more automations with that with shortcuts.
Yeah, so this is more that shortcuts can control the Apple TV versus versus you can run shortcuts on your Apple TV.
Hmm.
But you can open apps on it and play it, pause it, and essentially anything that the remote could technically do, you can do via shortcuts as well, which is pretty
Great,
useful.
it is.
So, for example, my movie time, it opens the Infuse app on my Apple TV, and dims the lights and everything for me. And I should add an action to control the volume of the soundbar now that we have that in Logitech Harmony.
Okay. Because right now the setup I have a home theater system, but I have to we have to switch it between modes, between cable TV to
Yeah.
stream box, and then trying to explain it to my wife, and then and everybody says the Apple TV remote sucks. It really does.
Well, I mean, the way that I dealt with this, because my boyfriend is a big fan of remote controls. He doesn't like talking to devices to control them. He would much prefer to pick something up and press a button, which is fair enough. A lot of people are like that, and sometimes I don't really want to talk to anything either, even if it is technology, as much as I love it. And so we got the Logitech Harmony Hub, which is a little box, but then you have one remote control that theoretically controls everything. And you can build things into that. So you can have a button on it that is then, for example, for the Apple TV, and it will switch the input of your TV to the Apple TV and wake the Apple TV, which is really nice.
Absolutely.
I find that that's quite useful. Though I do tend to use the Wake Apple TV action built into shortcuts. But that's possibly because I already had that set up.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, we definitely some more things to explore, and as far as Apple TV goes, too. Anything else you wanted to talk about with shortcuts? I think we hit a pretty good amount of time here on it. Unless there's something we missed.
I would just
please
suggest that
share.
even if you think, oh no, shortcuts is like programming, and I should just not do that because I'm going to mess everything up. Like, the worst thing that you can do is put your phone into dark mode and turn the brightness all the way down. Like, that's pretty much as bad as it's going to get. Maybe you'll turn the volume all the way up as well. But all of these things are things that you can fix. Like, you're not going to break your iPhone permanently with this. You're not going to. If you try and accidentally delete all your reminders, it's going to ask you 3 times if you're really, really sure about that before it deletes them. So you're not going to run into any difficulties. And I do feel that everyone should just give it a try.
Please, yes, and I've learned a lot, even just talking to you this short time here, and we're going to learn even more when we read your book and get into these shortcuts even more. So let's kind of switch gears here in discussion, and I know you mentioned this on Chuck Joyner's show with the gift guide, the Luna display, and I own it as well. I absolutely loved it, and I loved it when I bought it, but then it was. They were in trouble once Sidecar came up with Apple, so within Catalina. But you talked about a lot of that. What's your thoughts on Luna Display and the differences?
I personally see Luna Display as a better solution. So Sidecar is great, but you can't touch your iPad to control it, which to me feels like the Apple kind of missed an obvious thing there. And you need to use something like an Apple Pencil, which for many people is a reason that they now need an Apple Pencil. Excellent, or they actually have a use for it. But I much prefer Luna Display because you can use it with your finger, which with an iPad you're used to doing. And you can also use it as a primary display. Now, for some people, this may not be amazing, but if you think of, for example, I have a Mac Mini in my desk, and I'm sitting here talking to you on my MacBook Air right now. But if I wanted to control my Mac Mini, well, instead of trying to use some kind of solution to remotely control my desktop, I could actually just use my Luna Display and my iPad. And then I would have my entire Mac on my iPad ready, and I could just use it, and it works really well. And I personally see Luna Display as an excellent upgrade over Sidecar. So if you've never tried this before, then by all means, go ahead and use Sidecar. And if you're happy with it and it's great for you, then well done, awesome, wonderful. But if you want an upgraded version of Sidecar, that's when you can look at something like a Luna Display, because it really does work well.
And you're right. I mean, even Luna Display, like if I'm on my MacBook Pro, but I also have my Mac Mini next to me, I could easily run the app on my Mac Mini and extend my display from my MacBook Pro to the Mac Mini and have two screens.
Yeah,
using another Mac, which is amazing, or vice versa. If I want to start doing work on a Mac Mini,
imagine using your MacBook Pro's screen for your MacBook, for your Mac Mini. That's something that's awesome.
Yeah. No. So that's in itself. And then what's great about Luna Display? They just upgraded the firmware. I mean, the dongle is so tiny. I mean, it's the size of probably a thumbnail or a fingernail that you plug into USB-C, and it's still current hardware. It's not like it's anything outdated because they updated the firmware on it. So that's what I think is really cool about it. Sidecar in itself. What really is going to difference? I mean, there is really much difference what it can do beyond just extending your display
Yeah.
to the iPad through Catalina. Yeah, now you have to be running a later model Mac, and I think it's an iOS 13 as well with the
Yeah.
iPad.
Yeah.
So this won't work on older devices, and I don't think Luna Display will really either, as far if I recall
Well, Luna
correctly.
Display's been around for a while now, so I think it will still run on older devices. And
Yeah.
I know it runs well on Mojave because this
Okay.
machine right here is using Mojave, and it's perfect. There's no problems with it. I should upgrade this machine to Catalina at some point. It's my last holdout, just in case everything else
Sure.
failed.
No,
But
it's smart.
yeah, I despite wanting to be on the bleeding edge of everything, I did sit this year's Mech beta rounds out, and despite the fact that this is the end of December, I'm still lagging behind on updating this MacBook Air.
Nothing wrong with that. That's why I have extra Macs. I run betas on those and let those blow up and keep my primary. Yeah, my MacBook Pro didn't get upgraded until right when it came out, so I waited. So I do go on the cutting edge a little bit. Our co-host Warren Sklar, he is way on the cutting edge. As soon as it comes out, he's installing it. So there's people different as far as it comes with beta goes as well. So that's that. We have a link. I have a link in the show notes for both the Sidecar support article as well as Luna Display, and check it out. I think it's like $69, $79 for that display, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't looked lately.
I think it's around that, and they often have offer codes. So try checking your favorite podcasts to see if they have an offer code in the show notes that you can use.
Yeah, no, I don't have one, but I wish I had one, but I don't. Yes. So next topic I want to talk about a little bit. Both, you and I both are big Apple fans. Apple fan girl, Apple fanboy here, and I wanted to talk a little bit about what we kind of could expect in 2020 with Apple. I mean, right now it's just exciting because the fact you look at their stock and it's like it's the highest it's ever been. I think Apple's at its best it's ever been in its history. But I mean, there's what do you think? What are you going to expect as far as next year? We always expect new iPhones, new iPads, new Macs. What do you think on the iPhone? I mean,
I'm wondering if we're going to get the back completely covered with cameras instead of just the three that we have now.
That'd be great.
Well, it'd certainly be interesting. I'm really interested to see what they do with the iPad. The iPad had a year off this year.
It's outdated.
Not
it's
to
getting
say
outdated.
that the hardware. Yeah, the hardware is still awesome, but I'm interested to see what they do next year. I keep wanting the 12.9-inch iPad, and I keep not buying it because the last couple of times I've had a 12.9-inch, I've had two 12.9-inch iPads now, and I've sold them because I love them and they're amazing, but they're just too big. But at the same time, my 11-inch is too small. So I would really like to see Apple come up with an intermediary size. And I'm also wondering if we're going to see like a 14-inch MacBook Pro to match that lovely new 16-inch that's out. That's got a great keyboard. I popped by the Apple Store the other day to test it and got to play on the keyboard. And I like the keyboard, I have to say. Though the keyboard on my MacBook Air is great as well, but that's the latest Butterfly generation. And I think there's a slight difference in the Air version.
I've got the 2019 MacBook Pro, which I bought in June, and then of course the 16-inch came out a few months later. Yes. So I was pretty angry for a while, but I'm over it. This machine's awesome. I mean, it's gonna do well for me. The keyboard is good because it's the newer 2019 keyboard. But I mean, I had a 2017, and that keyboard was horrible. Yeah. So as far as that goes, I think an Apple Watch will keep going. The Series 6. I did not upgrade to the Series 5. I have the Series 4 right now. I'm perfectly happy with it. I don't think the 4 is huge. I didn't see much of a reason to jump from the 4 to the 5. What do you think?
I did because of the always on screen. And for me, that has been really useful. Just being able to glance down. Like if I glance down right now without moving my wrist, then I can see the approximate time. And that's really nice, especially in meetings where you want to check on the time discreetly without doing a somewhat exaggerated raise my wrist and look at it. Okay, it is now 10 past the hour, which means this meeting is overrun by 10 minutes. Sometimes you want to put on that kind of show in a meeting. Sometimes you don't. And most of the time I don't want to do that. So I found the always on screen for me was great. And I'm very curious to see what they do with the Series 6 because I have to say I'm really happy with my Series 5 and I'm not sure that there's a reason to upgrade, but I said that with the Series 4 as well. So
I'm usually one that does goes and upgrades. So that actually people will know as they've listened to the show. I'd be surprised. They're surprised I haven't upgraded. I'm always on the cutting edge, latest, greatest models. So, but that'll be interesting to see. And then the other thing too is that a lot of discussion is about 5G with the iPhone. They're going to introduce the 5G model.
I don't think they will, just because the networks aren't there yet. What's the point in adding this feature to a phone that none of the phones can use? And I'm assuming that 5G is not something that you can just throw into an iPhone and increase your cost by 10 cents.
Right.
I'm pretty certain that, I'm sure a lot of people still remember the iPhone 4 and you're holding it wrong with the cellular signal issues. I'm sure we'd all rather sit a year out and wait. And I've heard that Apple, I've heard from various different, media sources throughout the year that, Apple didn't release the iPhone 11 with 5G because they're hanging on and seeing how it plays out and delivering a great experience. And that's the Apple that I'm sure most of us know, that hold on for a little while, deliver late but better. That's how we got the iPod. That worked out pretty well. I'd be interested to see what they do with 5G to do that, to end up with the same conclusion.
It should be interesting. The other thing is services. Apple TV Plus is taking off. I mean, there's so many good shows. They're getting nominated for awards, and I think Apple is really seeing this to be a big thing, and they're going to invest lots of money into this. Have you watched any of the shows?
Yeah, so I've been watching the morning show. I'm really enjoying it. I haven't watched all of it yet. But
I won't, no spoilers.
Yes, but I'm really enjoying it. And I'm very curious to see what happens next year. People need to start paying for it, because this year people got it for free, assuming that you bought an iPhone or an Apple Watch or a Mac or an iPad or an Apple TV, which I'm sure quite a few people either bought or maybe got for Christmas or Hanukkah, or just as a present for themselves for no reason at all, which is a perfectly good reason. And so that's a year where people don't have to pay for it, but that will be really the moment where we will see if people genuinely like Apple TV and if they've got enough content to keep our money coming in. So.
Yeah. And then they mentioned the HomePod. I'm not sure where the HomePod's going to go.
HomePod Mini.
I think everybody wants those. I think everybody wants those. I've got a pair sitting next to me here, so they're pretty cool. And the sound is pretty amazing. But we're gonna it's gonna be interesting to see where that goes, because that market hasn't done too terribly well for Apple. So they haven't, as the results of watching stores discounting it very deeply over the Christmas holidays. So,
which may be how my HomePod multiplied. I think it's actually secretly a triple, because I now have two sitting on my desk as well.
Okay, so we're very much alike when it comes to that. And AR, I think obviously is going to be big. We'll see where Apple goes with that, with devices. I'd be interested to see. The tile that remember the tile they were talking about.
Those beacons.
Apple Tag is supposedly going to be called. Well, Tile just came out with their newer models. I had Tile. I bought a Tile, and it was cool, but the problem was after the battery wears out, it's throw it out and get another one. But they changed it now. I guess you can change the battery. So
I got some of those for my parents for Christmas last year. And this year they had a few items that still didn't have tiles that they needed. And after my mom misplaced some really nice Bose headphones after she came back from holiday, they were they were found again. She just put them she put them in the wrong drawer, and they went through the entire house twice looking for them and didn't find them, and then eventually realized, wait, maybe they're here, and found them. And so I suggested that my parents put tiles in their headphone cases as well. And so I got them an extra pair of tiles for Christmas and some batteries for the ones that I got them last year, so that they can update those. I was there going, do I need to get the Apple ones? But Apple didn't release them, so.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be interesting to see where Apple goes in 2020. We're going to be watching closely. Probably spending lots more money on stuff. So
I'm sure I will as well.
Yeah. So let's move on to some tips here. I threw some tips here for this week. A couple of them were on the Apple Watch, and one of them was using the zoom on the Apple Watch. Were you aware that you could do that on your watch if you want to zoom?
I've heard that you can do it. I'm pretty certain I enabled it once by accident, and then I had to Google how to turn it off. But it's pretty useful being able to increase the size of everything. So,
It is. And to turn it on, all you have to do is you go into the Apple Watch and you open in the settings app right in the watch, and then you go to accessibility and then zoom. You turn on zoom, and now it will zoom on any text. It'll zoom on anything that's on the watch. But like you said, yeah, it can be a little challenging if it's hard to control. I have a link. We have a link in show notes for the support article on it, and
mhm.
it gives you how to control the zoom and how you can perform actions with the zoom in and out. You can pinch just like you can on your iPhone or iPad, and the crown, digital crown would normally be used instead of panning. You could tap it once, two fingers, then you could switch. So there's some instructions on how to do it. So that's one tip I wanted to mention. The other one was the calculator. They put the calculator in the watch finally, which is nice because it makes it easy. Because in previous versions of the Watch OS, they didn't have that. So there's a calculator app that's on there now, and then the calculator app does have a split bill and tip calculator function within it. Got a link to this in the show notes. And basically, what you have to do is launch the calculator app on the watch, and then you put the total amount of the bill, and then there's a tip. There's a tip button right there.
Mm.
And you tap it, and then you give whatever percent that you want to tip, and then it also will break it down to people. So if you have 3 people in your party and you want to break it down to how much it costs per person, it's right on your watch. You don't have to pull your phone out.
It's pretty nice.
Yeah, wasn't sure if you were aware of that tip or not.
Oh, I've never used that before.
Yeah.
I've been a big PCalc fan for quite a while, so
Yep,
I've been
PCalc is
missing
pretty
out.
awesome. Um, this one here, I mentioned this is in OS Daily. I used to how to change what the AirPod stems do when squeaked. It says squeaked,
Mhm.
squeak squeak, and you when you do squeak the AirPods, I'm using the. Do you have AirPods Pro as well?
Oh, I do. Yes, I love
No,
them.
okay, me too. Love them, and there are ways of changing the how do you want to customize the controls. There was a shortcut for this, wasn't there or not? I think I thought it.
So what you can do with shortcuts is you can control the noise cancellation on them, which is what you can
Right,
do with the squeezing or squeaking of the stems as
right.
well. But I have it built into a shortcut. So when I leave work, as well as messaging my boyfriend, it also sets my noise cancellation to transparent mode so I don't get run over
Yeah.
by a tram as I walk home from work.
That's right. So there's a shortcut for that too. This article also goes through how you can customize which AirPods Pro earbud acts as your microphone, because there's microphones in
Hmm.
each one. You can change that, and there are a ton more things on here, but this just stood out as far as how you customize the controls. The way you can do it is you actually can go into the settings app, and then the AirPod Pros synced, and to tap Bluetooth, you locate the pros, then you type the I next to it, and that'll give you options there as far as changing how the behavior is. You could tap either noise control or Siri on. Oh, I shouldn't have said that dirty word. At the top of the screen, if you select her, it'll be done, and then if not, you just keep going. And again, this is in the show notes. This is another great tip as far as using AirPods Pro. I did an extensive review on the AirPods Pro, and like we both said, we absolutely love them.
Yeah.
I bought a pair for my wife for Christmas, and she has such challenges with her ears as getting them to stay in. And I was just hoping and hoping. So I'm gonna just keep pushing on. She's using the small spud, but I thought for sure I would see other manufacturers coming out with new buds to change the interchangeable. I mean, I thought there'd be a market for it. I haven't seen anything. Have you?
No, I haven't. But that function in the settings where you can test whether or not the seal is good is really useful.
Oh,
Because
100%.
I assumed that I would need the medium, and I tried the medium, and I was getting a little bit of earache, and I thought, well, I'll just try it. And it was like, no, 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 you don't have a good seal here. And I was
Yeah,
there going, well, I'm clearly not going to be using the large ones. My ears aren't that big. I'll try
yeah,
the small,
yeah,
and the
yeah.
small is so much more comfortable.
Oh, yeah.
But it's sometimes they're better off if they sit a little further out and you're using the larger ones. So maybe she wants to try that. I'm hoping though we get to see
Yeah,
some
me
alternative
too.
ones. I know Federico Battici modified his and put
Did he?
foam inside of the actual tips. So the tips are rubber that fold back, and he put foam inside of them to increase the seal.
And
So
that
that
didn't block the sound at all by putting foam in there?
no. So it's so where the rubber actually folds back onto itself. He put it between those two areas of rubber. I'll find a link so that you can put it in the show notes, so
Okay.
that people can see exactly what he did. But it was a pretty neat trick. I'm considering doing it myself because I do like to take these on planes. So
Yeah, me too. I mean, I actually had my AirPods Pro when they first came out, and then I took a trip to Vegas I think that was in November, and I have the Bose Quiet Comfort 35s I've been using forever, and everybody has those, so they're those are great headphones. But now I'm like, this is awesome. I don't have to lug my big headphones around with me when I travel anymore. These really make a difference when it comes to
Yeah,
noise
I mean,
canceling.
I still take my big over-ear noise canceling headphones on long
Yeah,
haul flights, but I don't take them on
yeah,
short haul flights anymore. Because
yeah.
if I'm only going to the UK to visit my parents, it's 2.5 hours. I can survive with AirPods
Right,
Pro.
sure. And a couple other tips I had in here. The I've always talked about this, how to close Safari tabs in iPhone and iPad, and when you browse the web, of course everybody taps the two double boxes and it shows how many pages you have open. I think I was
Mm.
I was helping one of my users in support one day, and I go in there and he had something like 560 tabs open. I couldn't believe Safari was still functioning. He had so many tabs open, and everybody knows that normally if you go into Safari, you can tap and hold it, and it gives you the option to close all the tabs. There isn't a way to enable automatic tab closing. I don't know if there's a shortcut for this. Is there?
No, there isn't, but I set mine to automatically close
Yeah,
the tabs after a day, which is basically as good as having a
yeah,
shortcut to it because it's, oh my gosh, I
yeah.
used to be one of those people with 300 open tabs on my
Yep.
iPhone, and I would just never go back to them. And it's like, well, if I haven't gone back to it in a couple of days, do I really need it anymore? No. So I
Yep.
set it to automatically close tabs after a day. And if it was important, I'll find it in my history. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. So the way to do that is if you open up the settings tab in your iPhone or iPad, go swipe down to Safari, swipe down again, and then you go to Safari. You go down to close the this time tapping close tabs, and then you can select like Rosemary mentioned is after one day. I think I'm gonna set that because it is a pain to
yeah.
close them all the time. So
Yeah. So I think I set my parents to do it after a week, and my grandmother as well, because otherwise, sometimes they do open things to come back to, a day or two later.
yeah,
But they are aware. I told them before I turned this setting on, that things would start disappearing. So if they wanted to come back to them, they should possibly look into using a task manager. So my mom very proudly informed me a few days ago that she's now using reminders.
there
So
you go. Well, that's
it's a start.
it's a start to get the mom and dad using technology. It always is a
Yeah.
challenge.
Well, I mean, they've been using it for a long time. We have a shared reminders list of things they want me to
Oh,
fix
good.
technology wise when I go home. And I asked for this because a lot of these things I can fix remotely before I go home. So we just get to spend time together instead of spending time together and me fixing their devices at the
There,
same time.
there you go. That's the
Um,
time of Christmas. That's the time during the holidays that we
yeah.
fix our
Yeah.
families' tech woes.
Yes. Well,
Um,
especially next time I go home, I'm setting up a Synology for them. So I want to make
oh,
sure that I
nice,
have all the time for that and as little time on the other tech problems as possible. So,
nice. So my last tip of the day was this episode is in here is how to change your email password on your iPhone or
mm,
iPad. And the way you do that is you go into settings and then you go into passwords and accounts. And they moved this since I think iOS 10 or iOS 9. I can't remember when, but they separated it out because people would normally go into mail and then they'd be able to get to their passwords too. But now it's all in one place. So
mhm.
there are two settings here. There's actually the websites and app passwords, which is very useful because you can go in there and you can edit and remove those at any time. But there's also the accounts. If you go to the actual account of your email, you could tap it, and if your password had changed, that's where generally you would go and make the change. If you do the web apps and the app passwords, especially for Google, because then Google would bring out your accounts .google.com page, and then you would sign things in, and then you would update your password that way. But that's usually the best way to do it is right from that setting for websites and app passwords going in there.
Yeah.
I use. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And no, I was going to say that's a really useful tip. I changed my email password a few weeks ago. I
Yeah.
couldn't figure out how to do this, and
Yeah.
so I ended up deleting my
Okay.
account and recreating it. Of course, there's a help documentation for this. I should have Googled it instead of
Yeah.
deleting my account, but it worked out fine. So
Oh yeah, yeah. No, my password had changed as well, so you have to if you forget this stuff, but we try to stay on top of things with this. And that's it in the tips, and then we just kind of move into a few quick apps real quick before we wrap things up here. A couple apps I found was Pickstructions. Are you familiar with this app?
no, I am not. This sounds really interesting.
Yeah, this was an interesting little app I had discovered. It's made by developer Archer Smith, and it is free, but you pay for like removing the ads and get some extra fonts. And what it does is it allows you to capture, annotate, markup, and create and publish a like a help page for maybe for your mom or for your dad or for any family member, and you create pictures by doing screenshots or pictures, taking pictures of stuff, and then you put notes into each one of them. It's like basically putting together little slides, like a slideshow, and then you share it. You could share it online, or you could share it as a PDF and send it to them. And it works really well. It's got markup, and I started playing with it a little bit. I've used stuff like Snagit's, one of my favorites editors, and you have of course the built-in stuff that Apple has already. But this app seems pretty cool.
Yeah, that's there used to be a great Mac application for something similar, but unfortunately it closed down. I've been looking for a replacement ever since, so I'm pleased to find out that this is now its replacement.
Yes, and it also has a Mac version too. So you have iPhone,
Yeah,
iPad, and Mac. So you can do it on the Mac if you want as well.
wonderful.
Um, and then I remember this app, and I've actually talked about this app before. This is an app called Radio Paradise, and this has been around for a long time. It's kind of like a unique blend of different types of music, and you don't have to build playlists. You don't have to have Apple Music, and you go out to this site and you just sign up for an account, and you hear different kind of eclectic types of music, like modern, classic rock, world music, electronica, and jazz, and it mixes it up. It's kind of a neat service, and it's free. It's absolutely free, and people love playing this. I love listening to this type of music, and you just play it in the background. I've done that a lot of times. I don't know if you were familiar with this one or not.
No, but I've been looking for a new system to play music at work, so I think I just found something.
Yeah, boy, I got you two great apps already. I'm
Yeah.
impressing myself here. So anyway, you had talked about was it Yoinks? Is
Yeah,
that the service?
Yoink. So Yoink, and it's actually a Mac application as well as an iPhone or an iPad application. And on the Mac, whenever you start dragging something, it just appears on one of the sides so that you can drop a document into it, so that you can just you're not putting the whole document there. You're just putting like a reference to the document there. So this is
Yeah.
really useful if you're trying to grab a bunch of things so that then you can prepare and send it off in an email later instead of putting it in the email straight away. You can just drag everything into Yoink from wherever you are and then go to mail and drag everything out and shove it into that email message. And on iPad and iPhone, you can do a similar sort of thing. So on the iPad, you could have it floating there as a shelf in that float overview or on part of your screen.
Mhm.
And I like to use it to just on iPhone and iPad, I actually put files into it. And this is really useful if you're downloading something and you want to be able to access it. You don't want to have to save it somewhere in particular. You just want to put it somewhere so that you can get it out and do this other thing with it and then be done with it. That's what I use Yoink for. And
Okay.
it's really great. So,
And we talked about Toolbox Pro. That was for shortcuts,
yes.
and then go ahead and you have an app as well.
Yeah, so my last one I mentioned earlier as well, Dark Noise. It's such a great iOS application for it just white noise essentially,
Yeah.
and it can do like thunder sounds, rain sounds, cats purring, men snoring, whatever you need,
Oh yeah.
and it
I don't
even
think my
has.
wife needs that. I do plenty of snoring.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sure most people do at some point in their lives. But it's a really great app and it's really nicely designed.
Nice.
And it's just a one-time purchase. And
Oh,
it
cool.
has excellent shortcut support. So
That's even
that
better.
that always wins me over if it has excellent shortcut support and is actually useful. So it's a great app. Uh,
Yes.
and the
All
developer
right.
is a really nice person as well. He's got an experimental feature where you can blend the noise with another
Nice.
like sound. So, for example, you could have rain sounds playing and listen to a podcast at the same time. And that's really nice if you're like on a plane or something. You just want to drown out the background noise a little bit more.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, gosh, this was a great show. We got through a lot of great information. I can't thank you enough for coming on. I
Thank
was
you for
gonna.
having me.
Oh, absolutely. And I wanted to let you tell everybody how they can get a hold of you. I did mention also that you're on Screencast Online right now, which I was really excited to see. Are you still doing
Yes.
that?
Yes, yeah. I just joined the Screencast Online team, and I've already recorded my next show. It's not out yet as
Okay,
we
good.
record this, and
You
so
you
it'll be
did you
out
did a
early
shortcuts.
January.
And you did a shortcuts one. I watched it. It was great.
Shortcuts one. I've also done BB Edit recently, and iOS 13. Up next, I'll give people a hint. It's a mailbox application with a difference. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So go ahead and tell everybody about you, how they can get a hold of you.
Well, I'm Rosemary Orchard. The easiest place to find me is rosemaryorchard.com, and that has links to podcasts, books, basically everything I do. So I host Automators and Nested Folders, with automation podcast and a productivity podcast. And I've got a few links to where you can find me, including on social media if you want to say hi.
Yes. And she's great. We met at MacStock, and I was so glad you got to make it out to MacStock.
Yes.
Hopefully you can make it out
next year.
You will. Okay, good.
Yes.
Good. I've already submitted
my plane ticket yet, but it's on my to-do list. So.
All right. I already submitted my talk, so I'm hoping I make the cut. So I have so far out of the last 5 years, so we'll see how it goes.
I'll cross my fingers for you.
Yeah. I don't know, are you going to submit? Did you submit one as well?
Not yet, but I have an idea, and it will be going off momentarily. So.
Got it. Okay, good. Either way, we'll see you, which is great.
Oh, yes.
But we'll be talking plenty about MacStock next year. And with that, I will wrap this show up for this week. This is a wrap for this week. Please send your comments, questions, and suggestions to our email address, feedback@intouchwithios.com. You can follow us on Twitter @intouchwithios. You can subscribe in your favorite podcatcher, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, and we're actually now on SoundCloud right now. I just added that as well. So,
wonderful.
But if you want to, better yet, go to our website at intouchwithios.com, where all the links to all the places to listen to us are there. I am Dave Ginsburg, and you can find me on Twitter @DaveG65. Rosemary, again, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I've had a great time.
Me too. And thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll talk again soon.
Bye.